mask on a Zoom call. Bad news is you can't get any refreshments. Although you can maybe get your own refreshments, yeah, and you maybe could have more exciting refreshments than we could serve at an extension meeting. So maybe I shouldn't say that. Tonight we're going to talk about how to communicate with the processor. Processing can be a little confusing sometimes, just the jargon and what the different types of processing are. So I'm just going to give you a few basics. I don't want to get into the real nitty-gritty details because there's a lot of them, and I don't know all of them, but we'll see what we can do, and that'll set us up to hear from Tyler. All I got to do now is get the little things to come up down here. There we go. So we're going to talk about all these different things. We're going to talk about amenable and non-amenable, USDA versus custom, religious exemptions, because you'll hear about those sometimes, especially if you do sheep or goats, where you can sell your meat, and how do you find a processor. And then I didn't put it on here, but I also have a little bit about like what is live weight, hanging weight, retail cuts, and what are the percentages. So let me find, it's hard to find the little arrows. There we go. So amenable or non-amenable. So amenable are animals that must be slaughtered under the Food Safety Inspection Service, and that's the USDA. And it's generally all of your livestock and most of your domesticated birds. I guess all domesticated birds, including farm-raised ostriches, interestingly enough. Amenable means answering to a higher power, basically, or to a higher standard. So that's what that means. Non-amenable would be the other animals, wild animals that are raised on a farm sometimes, even like deer and elk, bison, antelope, water buffalo, and this is out of the book, bison, squirrel, muskrat, nutria, I don't even know what a nutria looks like, opossum, raccoon, rabbits, and just in case you're raising snakes, you can have your snakes processed at a non-amenable plant. I didn't even know that was possible, but it is. Now, let's get more serious here. The USDA, which is sort of the gold standard, could be any size slaughterhouse, but it has an inspector that comes from the FSIS and inspects all the animals actually alive. He or she sees them alive, and then sees them afterwards hanging and looks at the carcass. They look at the lungs and the heart and the other organs, the liver, to determine that it was healthy and that the meat is of a safe quality. And in the past, they've always been a veterinarian. That's not always true anymore, but it was true in the past. The facilities and equipment, the building, in other words, also conform to the Sanitary Standard Operating Procedures, which is the SSOP. And they are inspected by the same inspectors or other USDA inspectors to assure that the actual facilities are in good shape and meet their standards. They also have a HACCP plan, that's a hazardous analysis of critical points. I'm not coming up with the right things for the acronym, but basically it's the hazard control. And that's a big plan that all the USDA plants have to have. They also require stunning when the animals are slaughtered. Usually, animals are delivered to the slaughterhouse in this case, that's down at the bottom there, as opposed to in custom, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can sell inspected meat from these facilities anywhere in the US, and you can even export it to sell or trade in international markets. And for some of us, I've sold stuff to people from Canada before. It's nice to have USDA processing because that's what it should be legally. You can also sell retail cuts. So if you have several steers done and you have freezers in your garage and they're plugged in, they have a recording thermometer, people can come and buy steaks or hamburger or whatever they want. You don't have to sell them a half or a quarter of a steer. They can actually buy retail cuts. You can also sell to restaurants, institutions, grocery stores, schools, almost anybody, basically, if you have USDA inspection. That is one of the reasons why it's in such high demand. And I mentioned earlier, usually you would deliver your animals to the slaughterhouse. It's very tricky to do mobile USDA slaughter because it requires the inspector. So that's USDA. And in our area in the North Country, we have Tri-Town. We had Willard's, although they're mostly closed. and we have Red Barn in Lewis County. Give me a minute here. There we go. And I'm not going to read all this to you. This will be in your handout so you have it. It does mention that USDA slaughterhouses can do non-amenable farmed red meat species like bison and elk, and it's considered inspected. It's a little tricky right now. Apparently there's a little shortage of actual inspectors, so even if we get some more USDA plants, we may have a challenge getting inspectors. Custom exempt or custom, we often hear it just called custom. Sometimes you call it state inspected. State inspected is sort of a misnomer because the state actually pays the USDA to do the inspection. So although it's called state inspected, it's the same people inspecting the custom plants. Custom exempt slaughter is provided only to the owner of the animal. And this is the most important thing. The meat is stamped not for sale. So you can't have something slaughtered and then sell the meat. You have to sell the animal to somebody. So if I have lambs for the Parker family, I may deliver them to the slaughterhouse, or actually they come to my farm usually and process them there to start with. They're sold as Parker, he takes them away as Parker's lambs. So basically you're telling them who owns the animal, even if they're coming to your farm to get them. So they do field harvesting, a lot of on-farm slaughter. They usually come, in my case, they shoot the lambs very carefully in the barn. And if it's cows, they can do it inside or outside. Hopefully Tyler will talk about that a little bit. And then they will hang the animal and drain the blood, and then they will take away the carcass and process it at their plant. Their facilities are inspected by the FSIS. It doesn't say how often. Somebody asked the question of how often, but it does say periodically in the instructions. So they are inspected. I know our local custom plant does not look like much on the outside, but it is very clean on the inside. And that's the important thing. If you're doing the freezer trade, which a lot of us are selling to our neighbors or our friends, you can sell the animal live. You can split a cow. One cow is very large to put in somebody's freezer. So you can split the cow 2 or 4 ways. I've even heard of people splitting a cow 10 ways. You just have to have all those people listed as the owners, and you have to figure out the cut sheet and who gets what. Otherwise, it's sort of a nightmare for the processor. A lot of times lambs and hogs are done in halves, and the customers decide on the cuts. So you need to make sure who's going to contact the butcher. In my case, I give the butcher the phone numbers of the people who own each lamb, and they call them, or I have the owners call them. I don't give them the cut sheets. In some cases, the farmer will have them fill out a cut sheet and we'll turn that in with the steer or the lamb. But that's one of the things you got to make sure you clear up with your processor so that you aren't holding them up. You can't sell this meat at the farmer's market or to restaurants or as retail cuts. So it's going to go in bulk to somebody who owns the animal. This is the official language. Again, I'm not going to read this. You'll have it in your notes. It does say, custom exempt slaughterhouse may process livestock and poultry without federal inspection of the live animal or the carcass, but it has to belong only for the owner. There are some other things. You may have heard the combination 5A or 5A poultry or 20C. And these are different. These are state licenses. There's 3 different poultry exemptions under 5A, and they can process up to 20,000 birds. And if you've heard of 20C, there's a 20C kitchen. We actually have one of those at the Cooperative Extension farm. And we have the kitchen, but if you wanted to use the 20C kitchen, you have to get your own 20C license. And you could take USDA slaughtered livestock and you could process it in the 20C kitchen and sell it as if it were USDA processed. It'd be a lot of work, but you could do it. And there's a description here of that when you want more specifics, and of the kitchen. I'm not going to read all those. I wanted to mention the religious exemptions. There's halal, which is a Muslim must kill them, and they have to face the animal to Mecca. and it's a throat cut with no stunning. Kosher is a trained Jewish person. It's a very similar sort of slaughter. They both say a blessing on the animal, but I know in the case of kosher, at least it's inspected by the rabbi. There are farms that are allowing Muslims to come to their farm and actually slaughter the animals on their farm, which is okay. You need to be a little careful because you've got people with a sharp knife, and sometimes you have kids running around, and you need to be sure not going to upset the neighbors and that sort of thing. They are exempt from stunning. They don't like to see or have any pork. If you're in a facility, they don't want any pork in the facility at the same time. Need to be careful of humane handling of the animals. And there are some other cultures which do, I think Asians especially do scalding or singeing of the hair off, say, a pig or a goat. And I did mention individuals coming to your farm to slaughter animals for their family. You do need to have a place to dispose of the offal, which composting could work. Need to be sure it's okay with your insurance, your neighbors, and they'll tell you that they will want to do it at the time when you most want to be doing something else. So make sure you're aware that it takes a little bit of time. It is a very good market for some people, though. So how are you going to find a processor, USDA or custom? Well, that's a tough question right now. It's hard to find anybody with any space, much less find anybody. You can actually Google and go on Facebook and say, find a meat processor near me. You'd be surprised what will come up. You can call CCE, Cooperative Extension. We are currently calling all the packers in the state and asking them if they want to be in the directory, whether they do lambs, pork, beef, goats, chickens, and we hope to have that done. Won't help you much this season, but hopefully it will help you next fall. And the Small Farms program in the past has had a map with the different slaughterhouses on it. That is down right now. I'm hoping they put that back up after they get all the information for the directory. So there will be some resources available. At the moment, your best bet might be to ask other livestock producers, agribusinesses, that sort of thing, and see if you can find somebody.
And I know Jean O'Toole, she added to the chat that Cornell has a list too of all different types.
Well, I think that's the one at Small Farms.
That's the one that we're updating right now, but at least that's one that they can go and base off of.
Yep.
But just be aware some of them are out of business.
Yeah, about 90% of them are not there anymore.
Yeah.
A few have revived with the demand, and we could use a few more. And it's a very tough because the business is kind of seasonal, and so it's a hard sell sometimes, but we could use a few more processors. Now, I put this on at the end. This is to help you understand what you start with and what you get back, because this is also confusing for your customers. And I'm going to unshare this for just a minute, if I can get my cursor to work. So bear with me a minute while I share something else. We are going to send you, after this local meats handout, which you don't try to read it there, but tells you a little bit about local meat. And then it has, like this for the cow, it tells you what you get from a cow, what the pounds are, what the dressing percentages are, some of the cuts, combinations, how much room it takes in the freezer, that kind of thing. Can be very helpful to people that you're selling animals to, so that they actually have an idea what to expect. It isn't all ribeyes, unfortunately, or all hamburger. Could be all hamburger, I guess. We have the same thing for hogs. There's a little section on lambs, and there's even a little section on chickens here. So you'll get that sent around to you after the webinar, and feel free to copy it and use it. I'm going to go back and share my screen again. Hopefully that's all working for you guys. So let's take a look at this. Unfortunately, I do not have a great pointer, but here's cattle, and here's the live, the hanging, and the retail cut. So if they're 1,200 pounds, trying to pick easy numbers, they hang about 60%. So the hanging weight, which you might hear called the dressed weight or the hanging weight, would be about 732 pounds. but that's not all retail cuts. There's quite a few bones in there. So retail cuts would be around 40%, so about 500 pounds of meat from a 1,200-pound steer. And that's going to vary a little depending on the type of steer. You know, it could be a thinner or heavier or well-muscled or less muscled, but that gives you an idea. So then I took the example of, let's use an easy example and say that it's $1 a pound. So that means if you did that, if you took the hanging weight and divided that by the $1,200, you get $1.64 a pound. That gives you an idea how much you'd have to charge for hanging weight to get $1 a pound live. And for retail cuts, that's only $2.40 a pound retail cuts. So most people are willing to pay quite a bit more than that. And I do see farmers undercutting themselves way too much. And so I said, well, let's say people are willing to pay $5 a pound. And that might be an average. Maybe your hamburger is $4 a pound and your steaks are $8 a pound. That's something you can use the Meat Suite price calculator to work on, which we'll also send you in the resources. So this one I worked backwards. I used a $5 a pound retail, and I figured out that that would be $3.41 hanging, or if you were selling that animal live, which technically you are, it'd be $2.08 a pound live. That just gives you some comparison. I did the same thing for lambs, and a really good lamb will hang about 50%, 45 to 50%. So let's say we have a 100-pound lamb. Yeah, we're picking really easy numbers now. Hanging weight would be about 50 pounds. Sometimes they hang lambs with the head on or the head off or the organs in or the organs not, so that's going to vary a little bit. When we shipped lambs to New York City, they wanted the head on, interestingly. And the retail cuts are going to be about 30, 35 pounds of meat, depending on how many bones you take out. Like if you make all boneless roasts, it's going to be less than that. It doesn't look like much if you're used to cows, but if you can sell them live for $2 a pound, that would be $4 a pound hanging, and an average of $5.71 per pound for the cuts. Now, I know that I need to get $7 a pound to break even on the retail cuts, at least average. So if I work that backwards, that's $4.90 a pound hanging or $2.45 a pound live. So that just sort of gives you some comparisons. And this will be, you'll get this in your handout so you can look at it a little closer, and you'll get that other handout. It is tricky to explain to people. I hear people say all the time that the processors stole their meat and that sort of thing. I don't think they'd be in business too long if they were really doing that. I don't think a lot of people realize that the hanging weight is not the same as the retail cuts. So make sure if you have customers coming and buying from your farm that you try to explain as much as you can, or just set a price for per pound retail, although technically you're supposed to be doing it on the live weight basis. But I know a lot of the beef people sell their beef on the hanging weight pounds. Just make sure you don't cut yourself too short, because there's a big demand for the meat right now, and you should certainly get at least what they're getting in the grocery store. So you might shop around and see what beef is going for and make sure that you're charging enough. I think that's my last slide. Are there questions in the chat box?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, just want to mention, I'm going to hold it up because it's very awkward here. But in the Small Farms program at Cornell online is the Guide to Direct Marketing Livestock and Poultry. And it's a lot of pages, but they have a new version out. I printed the whole thing, put it in a notebook. Has everything you could want to know about meat processing of all types. Maybe if you're only just doing cattle or something, you want to just print the parts that seem like they pertain to you, but it's a super good reference. I have it out at least once a week in my office to look something up. So that's a great resource that's out there that you can find. And we can put the link to that in the resources as well when we send them out. But that's a really good. There's also the Guide to Farming in New York, which is not just about direct marketing, but it does have a lot of good hints on direct marketing. We'll also send you, there's 2 videos by Matt LaRue that Mike Baker organized, our beef specialist, about how to market retail, direct market beef and sheep and swine, and probably poultry too. So I'm going to unshare. If I can. There you go. And do we want to put it on speaker view for Tyler, or maybe? I'll mute myself and you can introduce Tyler.
Yep, so it looks like speaker view is looking good for me. I don't know if that is working for everyone else. But so we'll go ahead and start Tyler's portion of the presentation. Tyler, if you want to introduce yourself and talk more about your business.
All right.
For
So I'm
starters.
Tyler Ebersol. I own Ebersol's Custom Cuttings in Adams, formerly Ramsey's Hog and Beef. So we do beef, pork, we do some lamb and goats, and all the poultry. So if anyone has any questions on anything about butchering, you can let me know and I'll try to answer them best I can.
So do you want to go into a little bit more detail on what's the best way to contact you, and probably best time that you think maybe for yourself, but also for other butcher shops?
Well, I'm best reached through either Facebook Messenger or right from my phone number. It's kind of hard to reach me during the day because usually I'm cutting or processing. So the best time to actually get a hold of me is after 4 o'clock. I can't say the same about other processors. I know a lot of them have more help than I do. So I don't have a secretary or anything like that to answer calls for me.
Sometimes early in the morning, according to Melissa.
Yep, early in the morning would work too, before 8 o'clock.
I know when we were doing our Packer survey update across the state, Melissa contacted all of hers by like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So that seemed to be a good time for the shops in Lewis County, at least. So when is it best to go and schedule ahead then for processing?
Well, pre-COVID, you could get away with scheduling a month in advance, but now I'm booking into February as it is, and I've got people on the books already for next fall. I'm pretty sure Red Barn is booked up for most of next fall already as well. So as soon as possible, as soon as you know how many animals you're going to have and about how long it's going to take to grow them is when you should be setting a date.
So fall, you would say fall's by far the busiest, though.
Yes. Yep. So most people try to get their pigs in the spring and have them gone before winter. So that's when we do most of our pork.
Right, and what else happens in the fall? People are out shooting deer.
Yep. So with deer, you can't process deer and pork or beef at the same time in the same building. You have to either shut down one or the other. So I have 2 separate rooms where I have a crew that does just deer, and then we do just the pork and beef. I know some places shut right down and only take the deer. And that's a big reason why it's hard to book in the fall also.
So if somebody calls you and you're going to come to their farm, do they bring the animals to you, or do you go collect the animals?
People bring their animals to me.
Do you have a spot, pen to hold them in?
Yep, I've got a barn with a couple holding pens, and I have my runway leading up to my kill floor.
That's nice. My custom guy does a great job, but he has to come to the farm to get them, and it's really hard to, it's just hard after you've fed them for a long time to actually be there when it happens, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Much as I enjoy eating them myself.
Yeah.
So we have a question in the chat, which it's actually good. It was just sent to me privately, but it was, why has the schedule changed because of COVID? And I think that's a really important piece to bring up. I don't know if you want to start on that, Tyler, and we can go and fill in afterwards.
Oh yeah. So I actually started when COVID hit. I was still working in a grocery store as a meat cutter, so I saw our stores get wiped right out. But people got scared. They wanted farm raised beef that they know they could get their hands on and didn't have to worry about catching anything from it, or because the big packing houses had tons of cases of COVID. So all these farmers that said, "Oh, we got to sell all this beef," they had to book it, and then a lot of people who'd never raised animals before decided, we got an acre of land, we can pasture some pigs. Well, they didn't think ahead about getting butchered. So all your processors got swamped with all these new customers. And that's what really backed everything up this year.
And so what do you do for like cuts? Like, do you have people give you their instructions, or do you want the farmer to give the instructions, or how does that work in your case?
It varies. I have cutting lists that I can give to the farmers. A lot of them, they give the people my number and have them call with their cutting orders. Then I have others that give me the numbers and I call the people for the cutting orders.
Do you have a preference?
The nicest way is to have it done when the cow comes in or whatever animal comes in, because then there's some I have to hound down for cutting orders, and
That's what I was thinking, because sometimes we have to bug them to get them also.
yeah. Yep. I was doing pigs today that I couldn't really let hang any further in my cooler. I needed the room and I didn't have the cutting orders for them. So I called the farmer that raised the pigs and I told him I can either you got to get a hold of the guy or I can do a generic cut, just a straight right across the board, all the same stuff.
And do you do smoking and make sausage and that sort of thing too, or are you strictly retail cuts?
No, we do specialty cuts as well. We do hams and bacons, and we do kielbasa and ring bologna and stuff like that. We also do smoked briskets and ribs and pretty much anything you'd like. We do jerky too.
Do you process lamb?
Yes, we do.
You do. This fall, a lot of the lamb producers got bumped by the USDA plants in favor of them doing steers and hogs. So they got bumped from August to March, which is a whole lifetime in a lamb business.
Yeah.
So that was very challenging for the lamb producers, and it's real frustrating to have animals in your barn and people over here that want them with money in their hand, and nothing, the in-between part is missing. So it is a little more challenging if you're raising lambs, especially to find USDA. But fortunately, lambs are pretty easy to sell custom because one lamb can still fit in your freezer pretty easily. And so you can sell them by the half and the whole.
The hard thing with lambs for processors is the weight can vary so much on them, and they're so small, it's hard to charge by the pound for them.
Right. That's my job, to get people to raise better lambs.
Yep.
We have a question from Kathy, and it's Tyler, what do you wish customers knew about how to work with you?
A little bit of what Betsy already went over. It's nice to know what the hanging weight versus what you'll get back and the live weight. A lot of people, I tell them the hanging weight and they expect to get that much meat back. But you got to figure when we trim all the fat out and remove bone, you're losing quite a bit of meat or quite a bit of weight.
Mm-hmm.
How about, are there things we could do with the animals before we bring them, like hold them off of feed, or, I mean, hopefully they're clean when they come, relatively.
With pork and beef, feed's not a big issue. It is with poultry. It makes it a lot easier if poultry is withheld at least 12 hours from feed. But beef and pork, it's not that big of an issue.
We have some more questions in the chat. How has your market been for hides, organ meats, offal?
The hide market is bottomed right out. I rendering won't even pick up hides for me right now. I have to compost them. So it used to be when I first started butchering, hides were worth $50 and that would pay for your rendering. But now they won't take those or cow heads. So the organ meats, I can't sell any organ meats because I'm only custom. So I don't know what the market is for those.
So you return those mostly to the buyer?
If they want them, or they go into rendering.
Okay. I know at the USDA plant, we can have them made into dog treats and things like that if we don't want them.
Yeah, a similar question was also asked, what happens to the parts you don't use? So it's getting composted for the most part, right, Tyler?
Yep, some of it gets composted, the rest of it gets picked up by rendering and turned into dog food and bone meal and stuff.
Yeah, okay. So when filling out a cut sheet for cattle, how do you calculate what different types of cuts you can get and what the weights of those cuts will be? Was the question. Betsy kind of already went over that in the presentation. Any thoughts on the best way to sell lamb, whole animal, so we don't confuse the customers? That might be a you question, Betsy, since you have the most experience.
I have pretty good luck selling lambs by the half and the whole because they aren't real big and it isn't a huge investment for people. They do have to understand that they're not all lamb chops, and I sometimes encourage them, if they don't eat a lot of roast, to make the leg into leg steaks and the shoulder into shoulder steaks, all things they can do on the grill, since that's how a lot of people like their lamb, marinated and grilled, or cut into like shish kebab kind of pieces or stew pieces, which is more work for Tyler, but might make it more appealing for them. I don't know, once I've sold the lamb to somebody, they seem to not have any problem. They want to come back and have some more, but I think they're relatively easy to sell because they're not so big. There's not such a large volume.
Tyler, what do you think one of the biggest bottlenecks are with communicating with processors, like some misconceptions that they may have? I know you talked about, having the information beforehand of the difference between hanging weight and the actual cuts, but is there anything else that you think that would make communication a little bit easier?
Well, knowing your cuts to start with is very helpful to me. I have a lot of people that come in, they want porterhouses and they want filet mignon. So on your porterhouse, the smaller side is actually your tenderloin, which is the same as your filet mignon. So you can't get both. You can only get one or the other. Same with your ribeyes and your prime rib. A lot of people try to get both. I mean, like on a rib, I can sort of cut it up a little bit, separate it, but I can't do that with a tenderloin.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess we're getting a couple of questions. How do you tell customers how much lamb meat they will get? And do you sell lamb by hanging, live, or retail weight? So Betsy, you're muted.
I had to let the dog out, so I had to mute myself for a minute. I sell them by the live weight. I basically tell them it's by the head, but it's actually by the live weight. Like 100-pound lamb might be $175 or $200, and then they pay the processor. So I deliver the lamb. They pay anywhere from $50 to $100 to have the lamb processed, usually, and then they pick it up and pay the processor. Although sometimes when the processor is getting desperate to get the things out of his freezer, I will go pick it up, pay the processor, and then deliver the lamb and get them to pay me for the processing if I need to. Or if I'm going anyways to get mine, I'll pick up my neighbor's, for example, and take his there. I use that same chart that I put up at the end of my handout, that basically a 100-pound lamb is going to be 30 to 35 pounds of meat. And there's also in that handout, it tells you, I can read it actually. You'll have 16 shoulder chops, 16 small lamb chops, 16 small loin chops. This would be probably bigger than a 100-pound lamb to have that many. You have the fore shanks, the hind shanks, the ribs, which you can use in stew. And you have 2 leg roasts, which you can either make into steaks or keep as roasts or maybe cut into half. So they're smaller roasts. And then you have enough to make some ground maybe or some stew meat. And so if you can explain that to them, and then sometimes it helps if you give them some recipes for some of those parts, like the shanks, which most people don't know how to cook, but you can throw them in the crock pot with a can of tomatoes and some spices and a few onions cut up, diced up, and makes a pretty good meal. And Jean, for example, has a lot of recipes for beef. And at the ASI, American Sheep Industry Association website, there's a lot of great lamb recipes. Probably if you just Google lamb recipes, there's a bunch of them on the internet anyways. But sometimes helps if you provide some of those to your customers or just talk to them about some of the different cuts and how to prepare them.
So another question we have is, Tyler, can you please discuss how some cuts are called different things, i.e. ribeye and Delmonico, and folks who may be familiar with their older butchers may not understand the difference in older wording versus current wording of cuts. For example, rib steaks and ribeye steaks.
So yep, there are a lot of cuts that go by multiple names. Your ribeye and Delmonico are one of them. They're the same exact steak. It's the boneless rib steak. Some people go by Delmonico, some go by ribeye. A lot of people swear they're different, but it's the exact same cut of meat. The same goes for your shank, soup bone, or shin bone. They're all the same exact cut. But the terminology, it does differ, but they are all the same cuts. And I do try to help people with that when they place their cutting orders.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it. So how did you get started in the business is a question. So I think your story is unique in how you started. And also I think we didn't have you explain where, like how you got into your current business now, but where you see yourself going with your business in the future. So if you want to share that, please.
So I got started about 10 years ago now. I started doing chickens and poultry 5A inspected. And then I actually started to go to college to be a vet and decided I like butchering more. So I started working at Ramsey's and Adams, where I learned my cuts, and then I was a grocery store cutter for a couple of years. And then when the opportunity came up to buy Ramsey's, I took them up on it, and that's where we are today. And then we plan on building a USDA facility within the next couple of years at a different location. That way we can better serve the farmers in the area.
Which would be really unique because in Jefferson County, we do not have a USDA facility. So there is definitely a need. So I think that's a good thing. And your wife, Alexis, is also working with you, right?
Yep. So my wife is actually the business owner. She's a teacher, but on the side she does come and help me. And I got her started on butchering poultry first, and now she does pork and beef with me as well.
So it's a family affair.
Yep.
Do you think it'll be quite different when you have to hire people? I mean, that's going to change your business quite a bit.
I do have some employees now. They're all part-time employees. They help me when they can. But we'll definitely need a full-time crew when we go USDA. So right now we're doing about 5,000 pounds a week. When we go USDA, it's probably going to look more like 15 to 20,000.
Would it be, from a producer standpoint, would it be helpful to you if we could spread out our production a little bit? I've toyed with ways of lambing at a different time so that my lambs would like show up in August at the slaughterhouse instead of wanting to do them in October, right in the middle of deer season.
I was actually just talking to a customer about this the other day. We were trying to figure out when he wanted to raise his pigs at. So deer season doesn't affect my shop. I know it does Miller's and Noltz's, but the it's kind of catch-22. Pigs you want to have done before winter comes. It's right about the same time as deer season.
But we'd like to have our lambs out of the barn by winter also.
Yep. Yeah, most people want, if they have the animals out on pasture, they want them gone before anything freezes up. But I mean, I guess pretty much with booking, it's first come, first serve. We try to get everyone in a timely manner, but we can only do so much per week.
Mm-hmm. What is your lightest time of year?
Lightest would be the middle of the summer, July, August.
Mm-hmm. So you're pretty busy even in the spring, like March, April?
Yep. So I'm all booked up for the first 2 weeks in February, and then I've got room for bookings, but I'm booked all the way up into June.
Wow.
Then
Good.
during the summer,
No, go ahead.
yeah, during the summer when it was Ramsey's, he actually used to shut down for the hottest months because it was cheaper to keep the coolers off.
Right.
I'm planning on cutting all the way straight through, but it'll depend on the demand.
Mm-hmm. I know that was one of the challenges. We had a meeting with the Tri-Town and Willards and people like that. Now, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, and the seasonality was very hard on them in terms of employing their help year round and that sort of thing. But I think they're pretty busy year round now, so
Yeah.
It's a good thing
You
for
want-
our local farmers.
Tyler, do you want to explain more of like your weekly schedule, like if you have certain kill days and other processing days and of your week?
Yep. So we try to keep our kill days to 2 days a week. That way we can cut 3 to 4 days a week. So Sundays we do our beef, and then rendering picks up on Monday or Tuesday, so that gets that right out of there quick. But then we try to cut all week long, and then Thursdays we process our pigs. And then beef we hang no more than 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, and then pigs you can cut pretty much as soon as they're cold, so we try to get them out of the cooler within a week. Then I try to keep it to less than anywhere between 8 to 10 beef a week and no more than 15 pigs.
And another question that we just got that's relative to this is, what is the ideal hanging time for each kind of meat if you have the cooler space?
So it all depends on your butcher's cooler temperatures. Mine runs a little bit higher, so they age quicker. So anywhere from, it's all on personal preference, but 7 to 14 days. Some people only like it a week, some want it 2 for beef. And then, like I said, pigs you can cut as soon as they're cold. Lambs and goats, you don't really want to hang more than 3 or 4 days because they will start to dry out. Such a lean meat. And then your poultry, we do that all on the same day.
I see another couple of questions here. Somebody's asking where they can find a guide to the different cuts of meats and the terminology used, and I'm going to point you to the Beef Council, New York Beef Council page. There's a whole section in there, resources on cuts of meat, shows meat cutting on small scale at least, and the different cuts, and there's charts and all kinds of great things there. So we'll be sure we include that in the resources list that we send out. I was there the other day looking up some things, and I was really impressed with what they've got there. And somebody else asked about, is there a problem with processing sheep older than a year? And there's no problem with it, but they aren't really considered lambs anymore. Although a year and a half old sheep is pretty good eating still. A lot of people have in their mind that mutton is really terrible because they had bad experiences with mutton while they were overseas in the army or something like that. In a bit, probably wasn't prepared correctly. But there's a difference between a year and a half year old lamb and like a 5-year-old sheep. So I don't think there's really a problem processing it. It might not be as desirable eating as all, unless you know how to cook it correctly.
And I see we have another question that asked, does the length of hanging time of beef directly affect the tenderness of the meat?
Yes, it does. So the longer you hang it, the more time that those enzymes break down and further make the meat more tender. So in my shop, we use vinegar to help speed that up as well. The vinegar will actually break down the meat. And it also helps keep the bacteria off the meat as well.
There is some shrink in the when the meat's hanging correctly, just from dehydration a little bit.
Yes, the longer you hang it, the more shrink you're going to have. And then there's also on beef, when you hang it for over 2 weeks, there is mold growth. So that all has to get trimmed out before any of your steaks are cut or grind, so you lose a lot more meat there as well.
Well, when I was in Europe and they were doing, everything was grass finished, and they were hanging those for a month, some of them. But they would shroud them with, they either wax them or they put like cheesecloth with something on it over the carcasses. And it was still not very tender. It was very disappointing if you're used to US beef. It tasted good, but it was very tough.
Yeah. So the older an animal, the better flavor it will have on its own, but the more tough it's going to be as well.
So a question is, how or what is the best way to prepare for an on-farm slaughter? Like, what can the producer go and do to help the butcher out?
Well, it's nice when the animal's already penned up, separate from the rest of the herd. You don't want to chase the animal too much, especially beef, because that build up the lactic acid and it'll make them tough, the adrenaline running through them. So you want to get them separated as calmly as possible. Get them, and then get them somewhere where you have access to water for washing, and also if you're doing beef, you're going to want somewhere you can get the tractor to hang them up and load them and stuff.
And do you have a cut sheet available, like your own particular cut sheet for your shop then?
I don't
Customers can
have
select
one on
from?
me, but I do
No,
have beef
that's fine.
and pork cut sheets, yes.
Okay, perfect. Do you have calming procedures in your facility?
Not really. We have a runway where the animals come right up. As soon as they're in the kill room, they're dispatched. So there's not too much room for them to get excited.
Another question is, from a butcher's perspective, can you tell the difference between an 18-month grain finished steer and an 18-month forage finished steer?
Usually your grain finished will have a lot more marbling, but that can also just depend on genetics. Other times your grain or your grass finished will be a little tougher because it's been out and it'll have a little gamier taste. But it's all on personal preference. A lot of people prefer the grass fed. I prefer mine finished on grain. But it's all what your customers want, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty challenging to do a really good job grass finishing. Is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Do we want to give Jean O'Toole a minute to talk? She's with the Beef Council and she happens to be on the webinar while people are thinking of other questions. Would you like to speak a minute, Jean? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity, Betsy. And this was a great thing that you and Cooperative Extension has put together. Just want to let those know that, you know, the New York Beef Council is a great resource for anything beef. In that essence that, you know, we're backed by the national program, Beef It's What's for Dinner. We're a little bit closer to home. We are putting on a webinar series ourselves in February, just for, you know, what to do with the cuts, how to talk about the cuts, how to market your cuts more properly and in that essence to your customer, and, you know, that beef breakdown. So it's kind of like a taking what you've just done and taking it at the next step and that marketing venue. I invite you all to check that out. We'll be rolling that out pretty soon. Or you can get a hold of Catherine Stager at the Beef Council and to gain more information. Another thing that we are creating is a beef core, and it's kind of that beef advocacy. We are training our producers to how to talk to the consumer and how to interact with them and how to tell their story. And we're doing a few of them also in the months of February and March. So it's pretty much downtime for a lot of folks, and it's the perfect time to capitalize it. Everything is going to be done virtual via webinar. And we highly encourage you that we have a ton of resources for you all. So again, check out our website, check out our Facebook. We do have a producer Facebook page called the New York Beef Checkoff, and that is on Facebook, and definitely invite you to check that out for sure as a resource and see what your checkoff dollars are doing. And you know, basically just kind of stay in touch with us. And Tyler, you and I spoke about a week or two ago, and we're putting some stuff together for, you know, the packers and processors. I'm waiting for Betsy and to come back with their own surveys and stuff to capitalize on that, just to kind of get that information out about the beef checkoff and some of the resources that we have. So those are a few things, but by all means, my email was in the chat, and our email and contact information, Catherine and myself, are on our website, nybeef.org. So definitely utilize us. Everything that we do is on the benefit of you, the beef checkoff, and it's all free.
Thanks, Jean. And we'll definitely go and have those links in the follow-up email. And this presentation will also be included, and the different resources and other links we have will be included as well.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. We have one more question in the chat, and make sure everyone, you know, feel free to unmute yourself and ask too, but you can also type it into the chat in these last few minutes we have. So the question is, we hang our deer with the skin on. Why do you skin them for hanging?
Well, the hides, the animals are a lot harder to skin once they're cold. It makes it a lot simpler to pull the hides off when they're still warm. And when we split the beef and the pigs and when they're in the cooler, so you don't want that hair getting into the meat. And then also the hides will hold smell. So if I hang a cooler full of animals with hides on, that meat's going to absorb that smell and you're going to taste it when you eat your steaks.
All right, so any more questions? Feel free to type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. And we also, I'll have our contact information from the extension employees, but also for Tyler too in that follow-up email. So you have us as resources. So if you have any questions to ask that you think of maybe afterwards, you can feel free to contact us. Any other questions? All right, so I think we're good. Getting a lot of thank yous in the chat, so
Definitely watch for the follow-up email because that'll have a lot of those resources. And we'll try to put the beef webinars in there. I do have the dates and things for those, so we'll try to include that too.
And there is one question, and they just want to know what is the official name of your custom shop?
It's Ebersol's Custom Cutting.
Yep, thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We had pretty good attendance for a Friday night before the week before Christmas. So we were kind of crazy for putting it together, but I guess you all are kind of crazy for joining us. Like I said, we'll be sending out a follow-up email and be on the lookout for that. Hopefully I get it out by next Monday is what I'm thinking. So that'll be sent out through email. Any other questions, feel free to email us. All right.
Thanks, folks, and
Last
thanks,
words?
Tyler.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, Tyler, for letting us grill you. All right. Well, take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Tyler. Bye.